So welcome everyone. I mean, I'm saying welcome. Obviously, you folks on Twitch, I very welcomed you. But to the people on YouTube who are seeing this in the future, welcome. Today I'm going to try and teach everyone how to play my card game, the YCG, and just how to generally use Lackeys overlay. Plans for the future for this game won't be hosted on Lackey, and it will be its own program. But when I say future, I mean like distant future, because I'm not that good at coding. So we'll cross those bridges when we come to it. So I guess the best place to start is what you're looking at right here. This is the field of play. Your character zones are the pink ones. By the way, I should change this match, shouldn't I? For the tutorial, that would be a good idea. Ignore how terrible this looks. I should point out for those of you who don't know, I've cut up the overlay, so when I'm on this tab, it looks awful. You can't see the tabs either; they're at the top. I cut them off, but if you have the program open yourself, you can see the 5 tabs at the top. I'm in the preference tab right now. It looks weird on stream. Don't worry about it. Everything else will look fine. I've set it up to make everything else look fine. Right. Basic play map. I just realized the box for the items is covered up by Twitch chat. You know what? It's fine. Irrelevant. We'll play them on the other side. So this is what your playmat looks like for the game. This is where all your stuff's going to be. You've got little tabs down the bottom. You can see them. They're pretty self-explanatory for anyone who's played a card game before. Hand deck, you know what those are. Prizes are more of a specific thing to Pokemon. But I think most people understand how that works. At the beginning of the game, you take cards from the top of your deck, put them in the prizes. You take one every time you achieve the goal to get a prize, and then the winner is the person who takes them all first. So that's the general gist of that. This red spot here is for arenas. So yeah, on all the playmats, it's pink for the characters and red for the arenas, just because that makes life easier, right? Even if they're different colors. Let's show you a card. I mean, there is a card right here, actually. Let's look at this. Yeah, Kirby does have all 3 effects. So this is a character card, Kirby, in his nice summer alt. There are 3 types of effects. Well, there are 4 types of effects. We'll forget about the 4th one for now. There are 3 types of ways an effect can resolve. Is how we should say it. As you can see, passive, triggers, and attacks. Passives are your basic effect that most cards have, I would say. I'm sure Lee and Cloudy can either back me up or disagree with me on that one. I feel like passive is the effect that most things have. So passives you can use whenever you like, mostly on your own turn, unless they say otherwise. But preface everything I'm saying with unless it states otherwise at the end of it. Because obviously sometimes an effect will say you can do this someone when you normally can't. Obviously that then overrides the actual rules. But in general, I'll just speak about the general way an effect works, So passives you can use whenever in your own turn. You can resolve as many times you like. Most of them say once per turn. Does this one? No, this one just says first damage. This is a bad example for a card, but it's fine. In general, they say once per turn, so you can normally only use it once. But yeah, passives basically use whenever, and your character can carry on doing things. So the last 2 types of effects, triggers and attacks, you can only use one on a card. So you can use as many as you like in the turn, but each card can only use 1. Like it becomes what we call dormant. It didn't used to be a word. It used to just say you couldn't use it, but it got complicated. So sorry, we've added in a bunch of extra words to the game now, which I guess is a good thing I made this after I did that, hey? Because otherwise it would already be outdated. So if you use a trigger effect, it's sort of like a passive. It resolves in the same way. It's just an effect. You use it before you're attacking sort of thing. But when a card is used to trigger, it goes dormant and can't do anything else for the rest of the turn. Again, unless other things change, yada yada. So attacks resolve like triggers in the way that after you've used one, you can't do anything else with the card. But if you use an attack, for the rest of the turn, you can only use attacks. So it's like a battle phase in Yu-Gi-Oh! But we don't have phases in this game because phases are confusing and they cause a million ruling issues. And I hate that. So we skip that by not having any phases at all. It's just once you use an attack, again, unless something states otherwise, for the rest of the turn, you can only use attacks until the end of your turn. So the one important thing to note with effects is that sometimes, let's find an example of one. I can think of one off the top of my head, so we will go to him. Where are you, Hotsuma? There he is. Sometimes an effect will state, it's like attacking Pokemon. Yeah, basically. That's the general gist of it. Because there's no battle phase in Pokemon, but once you choose to attack, you can't do anything the rest of your turn. That is basically where I got the general gist for that idea from. Sometimes an effect will resolve differently. So in the case here, the attack quick dash says this attack is treated as a passive when used. That's a really old wording, but basically means it resolves as a passive, right? So after you've used it, it's treated as if he's only done a passive, and therefore you can continue the rest of your turn. He doesn't go dormant because he's only used a passive, and your turn doesn't, like, you can't only use attacks the rest of the turn because you've used a passive. So that's the only important thing to notice on that. Hey, Kirby. I mean, yeah, that's good. Are you here to learn as well? I did. Yeah, I guess you are in the Discord chat. I was going to say I didn't specifically message you. Why would I have done? But yes. Yeah, Cloudy does raise a good point. That is a very specific instance. But if an effect resolves as something, like in this case, the attack resolves a passive, and it's negated, right? Hey, Reese, we are. Yes. I guess I didn't specifically directly invite you because I know you've seen the card game before, but you can come here and learn too. That's all good. You haven't missed too much. I've just generally described the characters. I'm on just naming effects. You haven't? Well then, that explains a lot. Okay, so yeah, if an effect like this attack that resolves a passive is negated, it will be treated as if you've just used an attack. And Cloudy is right. You will hate your opponent. I know from experience because we've had that exact interaction before. So yeah, that's the general gist of effects. One other thing to note, if you remember back here on the thing, you'll notice there's 5 character zones on your field, right? You got your front, so the letters for, if that wasn't obvious, F is front and B is back. We're using this just so you can see that as a general rule. Obviously the rest of them don't write it on, but you can probably work out what's your front row and what's your back row. I think you know the difference between those words. Only front row characters can attack. So your back row characters can use passives and triggers. Your front row characters can use all their effects, but the back row ones, unless otherwise, you cannot attack. Again, there are things that can make them attack, but in general, if you can't just say, right, I use an attack, even if it resolves differently. It's like Hatsuma, for example, good example here. He had the attack resolves the passive, but it is still an attack when he uses it, so he has to be on the front row to actually do that in the first place. Might sound complicated, but when you're playing, it's mostly simple, I would like to think. So there's a few other types of cards. Basically, anything that's not a character card, we call a help card. There are different variants of help cards. There will be more in the future. Spoilers? ? Actually, it's not that long away until the next one comes out, so I guess not really. Your 2 other basic types of cards are event cards, which are the green ones, and item cards, which are the blue ones. And I'll have to scroll way down to show you the other type of card, which is an arena. We have an arena here? There we go. We have arenas, which are red cards as well. So arenas are fairly self-explanatory for anyone who's played Yu-Gi-Oh! They're stolen straight from Yu-Gi-Oh! This zone here, the arena zone, they're field spells. They're field spells. You guys all know Yu-Gi-Oh!, right? Most people watching at home on YouTube, if you don't know Yu-Gi-Oh!, a field spell is basically a card you can only have control 1. It stays on the field and it affects both players equally. They're like Yu-Gi-Oh! Fixed, yeah, basically. So if there is an effect on your arena card, so Bob's Tavern here, for example, you get to discard a card, reveal the top 3 cards, and choose one to play it. Both players can use it. So if I'm controlling the arena and it's your turn, you can still use my arena card. Both players can use the arena. So some of them have like a more passive type effect, like this. That's just if you scrap 3 cards this turn, you can draw a card. You don't have to like specifically activate it. You just, yeah, okay, I get to draw a card. Or if you directly have to activate it like this one, you can still do it even if you don't control the arena. There is an arena card actually that plays an arena to your opponent's zone, which came out very recently. Where is it? This one here, Beach Episode. If you have a certain arena, you can play it to your opponent's zone, which is great because both players can still use both effects. Yes. Yes, they did used to be like that. And in this game, they will stay like that. Bob isn't a metal butler because it's not Robo Bob. Anyways, so yeah, arena cards, pretty simple. They are still counted as a help card. It should be pointed out, but they're fairly easy. Both players can use them. They stay on the field. You can only control 1. Simple. If you want to play 1 and you already control 1, you just send the other one offline. Simple as. So, items and events. The main difference between them, item stays on the field, event doesn't. So event is like a normal spell card in Yu-Gi-Oh! Or what do they call it in Magic? It's not enchantment, that's the other one. Lee can inform you of the name that they call it in Magic. Basically, the thing you play it, you get the effect, and then you send offline. So events are pretty simple. You just do what it says. Like, there's none of them are super complicated. Instant. There we go. Thank you. There you go. See, these guys know what I'm talking about. They're fairly simple. Items are a little more complicated because obviously you play them and they stay on the field. So some of them have effects when you play them to the field. Some of them you just use them whenever you feel like it, or some of them have specific timings for when they're used. Some of them require being placed in a certain place, which is why I'm showing you this one. It directly asks you to play it next to a zone, and then it affects that zone. For the rest of the cards, I should point out, this is all of the rest of the help cards that aren't arena cards. You can play them wherever the hell you want. It doesn't matter. On this specific game mat, the practice game mat, you can't see it because it's under chat, but there's this box over here, which is where we tend to chuck them, just because it makes life easier. Reading the card does explain the card. Yeah, it's amazing, right? In general, it doesn't matter. When I'm doing a test game later, I'll be playing them on the left side of my arenas here, just so you can actually see them, because, again, chat's over here. But it doesn't matter where you play them. There is no limit to playing them. The one thing I would suggest is if you have items with negated effects, you play them in a separate pile, just so it's a little less confusing for whoever's you're playing against. But, yeah, that's basically all I would say to that. So yeah, items used whenever on the field, normally in your own turn. All cards are only in your own turn unless it says otherwise. Equips, yes. Okay, so that's a very new ruling. The equips and their ownership, which I'm guessing you've checked the rules recently, because I literally, 2 days ago I added that? So there are a certain type of item which aren't any different to any other type of item. So in Yu-Gi-Oh! I'm going to keep going back to that one simply because I know everyone in chat has played Yu-Gi-Oh! I know not necessarily everyone on YouTube watching has, but I feel like a lot of you probably have, or at least know the general gist. But sorry, apologize in advance if that's confusing. So there are some item cards that use this word equip. So to equip a card is very simple. You literally right-click and equip, and it turns sideways. But you can equip to either player normally. Yeah, just as to a character. Some of them say to your own character. But whoever controls the equipped card is like which side of the field it's on. So if you equip your card to your opponent's character, it's their card now. Whereas with the items, if you play it next to an opponent's zone, as long as it's still facing you, it's still your card. Does that make sense? I think I'll explain that one a bit better when we're actually playing. I think that one's a little confusing for just the general going over the cards, but we'll come back to that if that was confusing. Don't worry too much about it. I think I've explained all the general card rulings. So let me load a deck, just so we can go over some things on the game zone. We have a tutorial. No, I actually have a tutorial deck. I was planning on recording a tutorial. I never got around to it. But I feel like there are some things we need to show on the field of play. So let's draw a couple of cards here so we can have some of each type of card. Please tell me there's an event in this deck. There we go. Okay. Well, I don't know if there's an arena in this deck or not. I can't remember. I built this. I think there is, but whatever. It's fine. So when it gets to your turn, you normally have 5 cards in hand. So you start the game with 5 cards. Okay. You draw every turn. Beginning of the turn is the first thing you do. Even if you go first. I know a lot of card games you don't draw if you go first. In this game, going first is actually a bad thing in general. Which is kind of a bit different than how most card games work. So you do get the draw if you're going first in this game. So you draw for turn, and then you play your cards as and when you do. And then obviously, as soon as you've done your first attack for the turn, you can only attack for the rest of the turn. You can no longer play cards from your hand. And then you pass your turn over to your opponent when you're done. So there is 16 cards here. I just wanted to draw an event card for a general, it doesn't really matter. So you're playing your cards out, obviously you focus on, right, I want this card to attack, so you put it in the front zone. You think, oh, this card is more of a support card, doesn't have any attacks, maybe you put it in the back row, because remember, back row cards can't attack. There are some cards that you might just want to keep in your hand, which is why Effect Veiler is here. It's a nice, good card to draw. Again, Yu-Gi-Oh! Players, you already know what this card does, basically. This second effect here is literally just Effect Veiler. It's no different. It does have effects on the field, though, because everything in Yu-Gi-Oh! Has free... Everything in Yu-Gi-Oh has one effect. Everything in the YCG has 3 effects. Awkward. I am recording this video for YouTube, hence why I've mentioned people on YouTube for the future. But yes, Kirby, yes, it is a very good idea. You can come back to this. Also, for clarification, for anyone who doesn't find videos as easy to learn something, or just would rather an instruction book, we have an instruction booklet, how to play this game. You can find it on the wiki, which if you're in Twitch, you can type !YCG and you will have a link to the wiki if you want to read along while we are learning. And hey, maybe you can be like, hey, you didn't mention this thing, because, you know what I'm like, I'll probably have forgotten something. And then I can, you know, go over the rules. So yeah, general gist of your turn, you draw for turn, you play your cards out, you know, you might play an item. Bad example of an item, this is a doll card, which I said you can place them anywhere. Doll cards actually have to be placed in a character zone, but whatever. It's swings and roundabouts. So you play all your cards out, whatever, you pass your turn to your opponent, and normally you have 5 prize cards. So to get a prize card, because obviously a prize card is the way you win this game, right? I mean, there are two win conditions. You either take all 5 of your prize cards, or your opponent cannot draw a card for the beginning of their turn, since that is a required thing for the game. One thing I should say is if you're playing your turn and you run out of cards in your deck, you don't instantly lose. Even if you activate an effect that draws a card and you have no cards left in your deck, you do not lose the game. You only lose the game if your turn starts and there's no cards left in your deck to draw. That's very specifically important, which we'll get into when we get into the flow of the game, of why that's specific. But you can play cards that draw cards when your deck is empty, and that's fine. It doesn't matter. It's only if the draw for the turn cannot be performed is when you lose. So yeah, getting prize cards, that's obviously the thing you need to know the most. To obtain a prize card, you have to remove all of your opponent's front row characters while you still have front row characters. I think I changed that rule, actually, didn't I? Lee, when we were playing the other day, I think I rechecked the rulings, and I think I changed it so it has to be on your own turn. Because it used to be where, like, if you somehow removed all your opponent's front row in their turn, whatever, ignore that. Now it's just, if you remove all your opponent's front row characters in your own turn, you get a prize card. There are some interesting ways you can get multiple prize cards in a turn. There's a card called Winda that when she leaves the field, you get to play another card from your deck in her zone. If she's the last card to leave the field, you get a prize card, and then if you can remove the one she brings out, you get another one. There are certain cards which can give you prize cards through other effects, like the effect will have a written in it. You can gain a prize card. Notable cards for that, I guess my favorite meme, which no one likes me playing, is this one. We call it the Akko Exodia deck, because I think it's 24 cards you need to have in your hand. Not an easy feat to do, but if you do it and you have 7 different cards with magic keywords, you can win the game in one turn. Most of in general, the cards that have an effect that give you a prize card are like very difficult to pull off, you know? They're never like just, oh yeah, you can get a free prize card. It's always like, if you do something very specific, it's just so you don't have to build your deck around, oh, my things are good at attacking or good at defending. There's more ways to, you know, build that. We'll go into deck building afterwards, but sorry, I missed that message. There is no such thing as between turns. There is no between turns. It just happens at the end of a turn. So at the end of a turn, it's still your turn, right? Like until the next turn has started. So if it says at the start of the turn it does damage, then it doesn't count. But if it's at the end of the turn and it knocks it out with that effect, then yes, it does count because it's still the end of the turn. There is no between turns. In the same way there's no phases, there is no between turns because that complicates rulings, and I hate things that complicate rulings. I have gone out of my way to make this like it does it? Well, screw me, I guess. Exactly. Oh my god, it does. Look, this is card number 8. For those of you who don't know, the number in the bottom corner, I don't know how easy it is to read on the stream, is basically how old the card is. This is very old wording. Let's pretend that says at the end of your turn, okay? Because it's fine. It's okay. I will warn you, there are a lot of cards that have old wordings because as the game's advanced, obviously I've streamlined the text more. For example, KO is a term used on quite a lot of more recent cards, whereas a lot of old cards will always say knockout or knocking out or something along those lines. Oh, fair enough, yeah. You do right. I mean, Evil Idol's a good card. Like, I can't deny you. Even though it's card number 8. It's kind of funny, actually, the older cards tend to still be really good. But yeah, so obviously there are some old wordings. Counters is very specifically one you might get confused at. For an example, Mad Dummy here specifically uses dummy counters, which you'll notice don't exist. They have been renamed to peons, I believe. Yep, here they are. This is... Oh, wow, I haven't changed the look of them on this. Oh, yeah, that's in the new update, never mind. But yes, they're the same thing. So I will try to change all the words eventually to update them to the modern text. But one person making a card game that has over 200 cards in, I think I can be let off for some of the wording still being really old wordings that we don't really use anymore. So, we've explained how a turn is played. We've explained how to win the game. We've explained the different types of cards. One other main thing I think we should mention are keywords. So keywords is something I would say is mostly unique to this game. Other games have them. It's sort of equivalent to like Yu-Gi-Oh's archetypes, or Hearthstone has... I think they're just called types in Hearthstone. It's sent offline. Did I not say? Did I really not say that? I'll get back to that in a second then, and the different ways you can remove things. I feel like keywords are kind of important. So at the bottom of every card... Oh, I didn't say that. You're right. I will get back to that. I haven't actually got to that yet. We will get back to that. Don't try to confuse people just yet. So, at the bottom of every card, in this blue bar at the bottom, there are a bunch of words. There is a set number of them that exist in the game. Again, you can see it on the wiki. Okay, yeah, fair enough. I know a lot of games tend to have something. Yeah, in Hearthstone, you normally have one. And not every card has one, but some cards have one. Or they'll have other keywords that give them certain traits or whatever, but that's neither here nor there. So, keywords basically defines everything in this game. So every card has at least one, which does sometimes lead to cards having... Oh, there's a good... It literally came up there. Cards sometimes having really stupid ones, because every card has to have one. There is a list of like 60 to 70 keywords that I choose from. I do occasionally add a keyword here and there if I suddenly think of a good one. But in general, I think we're pretty set right now. And then sometimes you get a card like this, and none of the keywords fit with it, so the only keyword it has is food, which is a straight-up lie, because tea is not food. So you occasionally get funny things like that. But in general, most of the keywords make sense. Every card has at least one. They're basically a general descriptive words of the characters, or cards, or whatever. But they're very important to how the game's played. So, let us find a card. There you go, this card is perfect. So Scrap Barrage here. See these words between the lines? I don't know if you can make out the lines again on the stream. I don't know how, like, good this looks from stream perspective. Because obviously I'm only seeing it from my perspective. My monitor's quite nice. But, so any words between these lines, they'll always have commas between each word. They are keywords. So every card has keywords, obviously, as I said. And depending on what keywords are on your characters, your opponent characters, whatever... will define how certain cards interact with each other. So a lot of ways you build decks are around keywords. This is a bad example for a deck for that, since it's a generic deck. But let's go look at a very early card. Heater, for example. All the Charmers are in the game. So the Charmers will have an effect that lets you search your deck for a card with a certain keyword. Sort of like, well, I don't actually search for cards in Yu-Gi-Oh, but it's close enough, right? So obviously Heater is the Fire Charmer. She searched for a card with fire, which is one of the keywords in the game. So then you can... Can you see this bit? Yes, you can. So you see down the bottom here, these little tick boxes? So they're actually below the card on the program. If you're looking at the program while watching this, I have slightly altered things on here to make it easier for you to see. You can see there's a box that says keywords contained, so you can just type in fire. Easier if you put a comma after it, just a heads up, because some keywords, like fire, are part of another keyword, because firearm is also a keyword. And then you can have a list of every card that has fire. I have made sure they're all correct, because I know I've missed some in the past, but for this update, they're all correct. And that is definitely a way that most people will build decks, and the way I would recommend you build decks. We'll get back to deck building after we've explained everything. But in general, stuff like that, Heater searches fire, so you run cards with fire. Pretty self-explanatory. There's other things that are like your attack's buffed if you have certain keywords. This effect only affects cards with certain keywords. You have to have a card with this keyword to use this effect, etc., etc. They're used for basically everything. Not quite everything, but like most cards in the game require some kind of keyword somewhere in some way. Yes, you can gain keywords. If we look at the Doctor here, he's a perfect example of this. He has a passive Psychic Paper, which you can gain any keyword, which is great. Does require you to know the keywords to use this card. Don't know why I put this in the tutorial deck in hindsight, but I guess keywords don't matter in the tutorial deck, so it doesn't super matter. There is a list of keywords on the wiki, so at any point you're playing the game and you're like, I don't know what keywords I'm looking for here, obviously your deck will be built around certain ones that you can see on card effects, so that's fine. But if you're in game and you don't know, there is a list on the wiki, and it will always be up to date. If I ever add a keyword or something, I'll put it on there straight away. So that will always be available. I always basically would, while you're learning this game, I would definitely recommend keeping the wiki open. I'll be honest, sometimes when I'm playing the game, I will open the wiki to check the rulings. And I'm the guy that made the game. Not that the rulings are confusing, but it's just nice to have like a backup, you know? So yes, back to something Cloudy said earlier that I totally forgot to mention. The way the game flows, obviously, you take it in turns, right? If you're only drawing one card a turn, you might think you're going to run out of cards. So, one extra rule we have in this game is if a front row character is knocked out, since that's what your opponent has to do to get prizes, right? They have to knock out all your front row characters, or remove them from the field other ways. Knockout is, specifically dealing damage to them. You get to draw. So if, say, for example, my opponent had this Mo here, and he used his Funk Dancing for self-defense, dealt 16 damage to my Scrap Dragon, so my Scrap Dragon dies, I would then get to draw a card, because my front row character has been removed by my opponent, specifically. If you remove your own front row character, you do not get to draw, because otherwise I could just sit here and be like, I replaced this character by playing this other character over it. Oh look, I get to draw. You don't get to do that. That would be dumb, and you draw for your entire deck in a turn. And lose the game, actually, funny enough, because unless you've got something to refresh your deck every turn. But that would be stupid. Knocked out or sent offline, yes. Yes, true. Specifically the offline pile. Remove from game is interesting. There aren't many cards that do that. So there isn't any specific rulings for it. There is a card in the future that when cards are removed from the game, you will still get to draw. But as for everyone here, I wouldn't worry about that as a ruling, because I'm pretty sure it's written on the card. It's not out yet anyway. Galaxy Eyes is the only card that can remove a card on the field right now. I think there's one in the next update. Maybe. But it's not... So remove from game is similar to the banish in Yu-Gi-Oh! Except the only difference is if a card is removed from the game. So we have these little tabs here. Offline is obviously the discard pile. Offline pile. Remove from game basically means you cannot get the card back unless the card that removed it brings it back. So Galaxy Eyes has an effect that when it attacks something, it can remove itself and them from the game, and then they come back at the end of the turn. Esper Girl can also remove the top card of your deck, and then you add that back. But they add the cards back themselves. Any other card that just removes a card from the game, it's gone. That's why it's called remove from game. I know that's a long term, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Changed it to banish to make it easier. But no, we're not calling it that because you're never getting them back. Unless the card that removed it brings it back, it's gone. But it's still nice to have a list of them here. So I'll be honest, when the game first started, we didn't have this as a tab, and I used to just chuck them on the table. So be happy that we added this tab, because otherwise it would be a mess. So we know the general flow of the game. I think we've gone over all the rulings. I will quickly do a read-through of the rulings for myself, like the way it flows, just to check I didn't miss something obvious. So we've done the card overview, you know about keywords, types of effects. Oh, no, there's one type of effect we forgot. Yeah, we'll get to that in just 1 second. So, characters, I said I have 3 types of effects, right? Passives, attacks, and triggers. Every single every single character also has an unwritten attack, just known as a basic attack. So it's not an effect. That's why it's not written on any of the cards. But basically, let's say, for example, for whatever reason, Yuri ended up in my front row, right? And I didn't want to use her triggers this turn. But it got to the end of the turn, my character attack, I'm like, I might as well do something with her, right? Because she's not gone dormant. So you can just attack with any card, character, I might as well say card, because if they're in only front row zone anyway, right, and the rest of your cards aren't there. So you can use a basic attack with any character in your front row if they don't have any other attack you want to use, or they don't have a trigger you want to use. Basically, you know, if you've got a card that hasn't gone dormant, you might as well attack. Yeah, basically. What Lee says, you can indeed do that. Basic attack always does 1 damage unless, you know, other things are buffing it. That is just a thing to take note of. I feel like I'm the only person who's ever used basic attack in this game. So I want to teach you all that the basic attack exists. So maybe in the future when I'm playing against someone else that isn't Cloudy or Lee, one of you will be like, I'm going to use this basic attack because I remember it's a function in this game, even though it's not written on the cards, but it's very specifically a function. And it does get around a lot of things in general. There are sometimes like your card can't use effects. Not always. Sometimes your card is like, oh, you cannot use any effects on this. Doesn't say you can't use the basic attack because it's not an effect. So just want to point out, you know, sometimes, oh, this card can't be targeted by an effect, but you can still target it with a basic attack. And anything that buffs attacks will still buff the basic attack. So that's a general gist. Speaking of buffs and gaining keywords and other such things like that, there is a function specifically to Lackey. This is something that's only relevant if the game is still on Lackey. The note function here. You're going to use this a lot, so keep in mind that this exists, because cards will gain keywords, cards will gain damage buffs or damage decreases, or when a card is damaged, there's no way to do health otherwise. So we just write in here, like, oh, let's say I've taken 10 damage, I'll put like -10, and I've gained the love keyword. There we go. We'd write something like that. Just a general tip, because otherwise it would get really confusing if you try to remember all of it. It is a digital card game. It has a note button. Use it. That's a general, just a tip for Lackey specifically. When the game is like its own program, hopefully I'll have it so that cards keep track of everything like that. No, Cloudy, I only do all of it for you. Lee's nice and does his own notes. And I'm hoping other players in the future will too. So yeah, right. What was the other thing we said we'd go back to in a second, or did we already do that? Have I gone over everything? I was looking through the instructions. I think you mentioned something a second ago, Cloudy, right? Offline pile. Yes, offline pile. So, the one major difference, and I would say this is like the biggest difference between this card game and literally every other card game, is so, okay, I'll show you with an example. Let's swap character for a second. We are test dummy now. Let's load another deck. So you notice there is already 2 cards in the offline pile, right? So let's discard a card from my hand, drag it to the offline pile. Now there's 3 cards. It's 1 pile. So in most card games, each player has their own graveyard or discard pile, or I don't know what Magic calls it. I think it's also graveyard or maybe discard pile. I have no idea. Whatever it is, each player has their own separate one. In this game, we don't. It's completely shared. The remove from play pile is the same, but it's, again, doesn't matter really. That's irrelevant. So any card you send offline, your opponent is now completely free to use it. So imagine, we'll use Yuga as an example again. Monster Reborn specifically says you can target a monster in either player's graveyard, right? Well, imagine that, but for every card. What is also important to know about this is that when a card is in the offline pile, it's no longer considered either player's card. So if a card is in your hand, in your deck, on your field, it is your card, right? It's in your offline pile. It's no one's card. It's just there. I don't know if that's super important, but I guess it might be. I feel like it was worth mentioning anyway. So yeah, the offline pile, the remove from game pile, they're both shared completely. So sometimes you might want to play a deck that uses graveyard resources as a term. Obviously, it's not called the graveyard in this game. Where you just mill a bunch of cards or discard or scrap a bunch of cards. But keep in mind, your opponent can always use those resources too, right? Yes, there you go. So Winda is a perfect example of that. Yeah, I've mentioned Winda like twice now. Let's actually just show you that card because I feel like I'm going to keep mentioning her otherwise. She's very useful for rulings. She's good like that. Where are you, Winda? There you are. So Winda has an effect that allows you to shuffle 2 cards with the air keyword, the offline pile, into your deck to target a card your opponent controls and return to the hand, right? So, as Lee has so rightly mentioned, if you, let's say Winda and like 2 other wind cards were in the offline pile, right? And you had Scrap Dragon. We saw Scrap Dragon earlier. Where is he? Here he is. The Scrap Dragon, if he scraps himself, he gets to bring a card back with 8 HP or less. So Winda has 8 HP. Isn't that nice? Your opponent was playing Winda, and it's in the offline pile now. So you could summon your opponent's Winda to your field, and then use her effect to shuffle 2 more of your opponent's cards into your deck to get rid of your opponent's card. Yeah, basically that exact meme. And that is definitely 100% a way to screw your opponent out of not only their game plan, but also to not stop yourself decking out. Isn't that right, Lee? Anyways, enough about Lee trolling me. But whoa! Oh, sorry, that confused me for a second then, because I flipped out. I flipped what side I'm on. I forgot the playmat did that, to be honest. So, except for all those times you've lost by decking out, right? So I think, again, I'm going to go back to the rules, but I think I've explained everything in the game now. So I've explained how the field works, the offline pile, the hand. Obviously, you draw cards. You know how to play cards from your hand. I don't think I need to explain that. Prizes. You take a prize if you knock out your opponent's front 3 characters or some other way. I guess scrap is a term I should probably mention. Here's old Scrap Dragon. So scrap isn't anything super interesting or difficult to get a hold of. Lots of cards will say they scrap a card instead of discard or send offline. It basically is the same thing. You can scrap a card from your field or your hand. That's really the only difference. It's just that because there are so many cards that use that word, like there's a field spell scrapyard that says if you've scrapped 3 cards this turn, you can draw a card, right? So obviously something saying discard or send offline isn't scrapping, but if it says scrap, it is. It's just good to keep in note that that is an extra word. Yes, everything in this game is hand-drawn, just so you know, Kirby. I don't know if you knew that, but not all by me. Cloudy did a few of these cards, like this one here. But all of these cards are, well, not true. Some of them are photos, actually. Don't question it. I just wanted to make some arts different, you know. Shh, Cloudy, I already mentioned that. You're just behind. Right, yeah, back to checking. I have definitely said everything. So you know how the field works, you know how prizes work, you know how turns work. Evolution effects were one type of effect I didn't mention. The general gist of an evolution effect is pretty simple. They resolve as triggers unless the card states otherwise. To use an evolution effect, you have to have the card it mentions underneath it. So Tangle here has an evolution effect, is attack, power whip. To play it, you have to have Tangle underneath it, which is another card. If you have a card with an evolution effect in your hand, you can just play it on top of another card on the field. So it's basically like evolution in Pokemon, I guess, which is why I thought Tangler was a good example since he is a Pokemon. So yeah, or in some cases, like Tangle can specifically transform from the deck. Transform is the other keyword, I suppose. That's also fairly simple. Transform is normally from the deck unless it states otherwise, and literally whatever the card says you transform, you just search it wherever, and it basically writes itself. It's just you can search your deck for a card and play it on top of it. So, yes, we are. I just thought I'd mention transforming and evolution effects, since they are words that don't specifically explain themselves, but they're fairly self-explanatory. So I don't think that's too bad. I mean, counters is another thing. To place counters on a card, like I said, specifically a Lackey thing, you right-click, all the list of counters are here. So like, oh yeah, I'm adding a dessert counter to that, whatever, and it adds it. You remove it in the same way. Counters, you know, cards will mention it. The only 3 counters that are important are the top 3 on here. Armor, Bleed, and Decoy have their own effects. So an armor counter, you can only have 1 armor counter on a card at a time. So all your cards can have an armor counter, but they can't have more than 1 each. An armor counter is basically 8 HP extra. So if your character takes less than 8 damage, they won't take any damage. Like, the armor counter nullifies it. If they take more than 8 damage, you remove the armor counter and take 8 damage away from the effect. So if they take exactly 8, it just removes the counter. But yeah, basically it's like an extra health. And, you know, just imagine, like, when an attack hits it for more than 8, it shatters the armor, and then the rest of the damage is dealt. Decoy counters are similar, and you can only have 1. If you have a decoy counter on, anytime you're targeted, the first time you're targeted for any kind of effect, your opponent's effect specifically, not your own effect, or that would be shit. If you're targeted by your opponent's effect, whether it's an attack, an event card, a character effect, doesn't matter what it is, you negate that effect and remove the counter. So basically, it's like you get one evasion from some kind of effect, which does mean they are fairly easy to get rid of. You can just target it with some shitty effect, like Emmy has an effect. You can target a character on the field and give it the fast keyword. There you go. Just target one of your opponent's characters and you get rid of the counter right for free. The last one of these is bleed counter. For those of you who know Pokemon, it's poison. Bleed counter is poison. Burn, I guess they're the same thing, really. So between turns, I shouldn't use that term. At the end of each turn, the character with bleed counter takes 3 damage. Simple as that. You can have as many on a card as you want. Don't know why you want bleed counters on your own cards, but maybe there's a card in the future that wants bleed counters. I'm not spoiling anything. All the rest of the type of counters are directly just a card will say, hey, this uses mana, or hey, this uses desserts or shadows or whatever, and they do whatever the card says they do. They don't have any effects on their own, so they're like spell counters in Yu-Gi-Oh! Basically. Armor does stop bleed damage, yes. Any damage you take, effect damage, attack damage, whatever it is, if it is less... No, actually, wait. Armor... I don't know my own rulings for armor counters. I don't think armor counter does stop bleed damage, you know? That's a good question. Let me go and check the terminology, because I don't know the ruling for my own card game. Look, I said it wasn't complicated, and it's not, but... bleed counter damage is not negated by an armor counter, and it is not reduced by effects that increase or reduce damage unless it specifically changes bleed counter damage. I'm glad I wrote that on the rules. It doesn't. Yeah, armor does not stop bleeds. Decoy also doesn't. I mean, not that it would. But yeah, basically bleed counter is like your way of getting past armor. Armor does stop effect damage, though. I'm like 90% certain of that. I will double check, but I'm 90% certain it does stop effect damage. Yeah, it just says should take damage. It's only specifically bleed counters it doesn't. Okay, just checking. And just for clarity, if a card can have both an armor counter and a decoy at the same time. They can only have one of each, but they can have both. That has definitely come up in the past with a card that we had to change that spammed decoy counters to the field, and we realized it was kind of ridiculous. So we dialed decoy counters back a bit. Does armor work versus several instances of damage? If you 5 damage twice, yes. That is a perfect, good question. Let us show you Dio. So Dio is a very, very good card that is hard countered by armor counters. I can't remember what number Dio is. He's near here, right? Right? There he is. So, Dio has an attack, Muda, as everyone who knows Jojo probably already knows. So, the idea of this attack is you can't reduce the damage. But armor counter doesn't reduce damage, right? It negates it. So, it will hit for 10 damage overall. But the armor counter specifically works on instances of damage. So you don't take 10 damage, you take 2, and then 2, and then 2, right? So if someone has an armor counter and you try to use the attack, it will just do nothing. It will negate every hit of it. So, yes, if you are using any kind of attack that does multi-hits, whether it's Dio, whether it's Talim, whether it's... I can't think of a third card that does a multi-hit attack, but I'm sure there is one. There are several of them. While obviously there are lots of good uses for multi-hits attacks, not in this case because this one specifically can't be increased, but using Talim as an example, if you're increasing damage, obviously you're increasing it multiple times, but the downside of it is armor completely counters it, so there's like a rock, paper, scissors sort of motion there. Yeah, Reaper literally does hit twice, but it's for 8 damage, so that is a terrible example. If you lower the damage that Reaper is doing, then that works, right? But yeah, I think Talim is probably the best example of it. Where is she? I don't know what number Talim is. No one uses Talim. There she is. Yeah, because it does 5 damage, potentially 4 times. But if you've got an armor counter, 0. How does armor counter work if something like Groudon is affecting damage dealt? A counter is countered as not affecting stuff. I need you to ask that question in a different way because I don't quite understand. I mean... Are you on about Groudon affects damage in 2 different ways? So again, you're also going to have to be a bit more specific. Groudon, he's not a complicated card, but he's an interesting one. If you're referring to the fact that the attack damage can't be reduced, that is a ruling that has never come up before. So we're going to make up a ruling on the spot. I would say that armor doesn't reduce damage as an effect. So, like, your character still has armor. You still take the damage, right? So if he's hitting for Solar Beam for 10 damage, it's only going to deal 2. It's still because you're still damaging the armor rather than the character actually reducing the damage, if that makes sense. I think that's how it should work anyway. Sometimes we have rulings in this. The thing when you're making your own card game is sometimes a ruling will turn up that's never occurred before, and you're like, oh, how does this work? And you kind of have to make it up on the spot. But that's part of the fun, you know? I'm always around if you guys are playing with not me to answer questions. I basically exist at all hours of the day, so apart from when I'm sleeping. So I'm always near Discord. So if you do it, we tend to add things like that to there's a section on the YCG wiki, or the TheYukiverse wiki, frequently asked questions, even though they're not actually frequently asked questions. But whenever something like that comes up, I tend to add it on there as a specific extra ruling of a specific card interaction. So if someone reminds me, I'll add that Groudon armor counter interaction on there later. I'm not going to do it now because that would be a pain. So I think we've gone over the general gist of everything now. I did check through this. I will double check for it. Field, starting game. I did say at the start of the game you draw 5 cards in opening hand. I don't know if I mentioned that. There is potential for something like that, honestly. Something we talked about didn't come to a conclusion of. Yep, go ahead. Just checking through the rules again to check. I definitely mentioned everything. Yep, taking prize cards, taking turns. Oh yeah, there was a thing on here about the bonus game mode. I'll quickly mention that in a minute, but that's just a for fun thing. Oh, there is one other thing I haven't met. Well, 2 other things. I get one of them is only just added to the game. Does everything target? No. Most things target. So I think in general, and I'm saying that as a base term because I don't know for certain, but I think in general, everything targets something, but not everything. So that might sound confusing. Groudon is a perfect example. Let's look at Groudon. So if you're using an attack, you have to target something. Simple as that. Attacks target, right? But Groudon specifically does damage to all other characters, right? You do not target every character. You just target one character with Groudon's attack, and then everything else is affected by it. So technically, okay, I was about to say technically it's effect damage. No, it's not. Actually, the way it's worded, it's not effect damage. It doesn't say 8 damage. Okay, so it is still attack damage, but you only target one thing. Wait, Kirby would need a second attack. Wait, why would it sometimes do 0? Hold up, I'm confused. I've missed something there, Reese. We're talking about Kirby being OP, and I'm either OP or terrible, and he's a very middle of the ground card. Oh, Kirby's card. Sorry, when you were saying, I thought you were talking about the card Kirby, and I was very confused. Okay, carry on. I thought there was 2 cards in this game that are just called Kirby, and I was like, I don't think either of them are either overpowered or underpowered. They're both fairly okay, you know? So yeah, using this example, Earthquake does not target everything. It can deal damage to everything, well, potentially, but it does not target everything. Whereas, where are you, Anna? There you are. Anna's PK Fire, this attack targets all characters your opponent controls. So this one specifically does target multiple characters. I like things to be simplified in the wording. So if effect specifically says it targets everything, then it targets everything. If an effect doesn't say it targets anything, then it's only going to target the one thing you originally target, right? Yes, if it's an effect like that, it is targeting. That's just me being bad at wording. Sometimes cards will say, choose. That's just target. I'm just a dumbass, okay? You know, at the end of the day, I've written out, 230 of these things. How many cards are in this game right now? 241. And that's only how many are on here, not mentioning the next update has another 25 cards in it. So that's 270 cards. You know, I think I can be let off of sometimes miswording things. I'll go check Duelist Javel. Yes, that would target. It doesn't say it. that would target. You just target a character, deal 4 damage. So I will apologize in those cases, but in general, I would say most, if not everything, targets something, but not everything. So going back to Groudon as an example, his attack does not target everything. That is very important because there are some cards that can't be targeted, or some cards that redirect something if they're targeted, or decoy counters, for example, negate the first thing that targets them. So if you had decoy counters on your back row and you try to Earthquake your opponent's front row and it targeted everything, you'd be like, okay, I negate it because it should hit this one thing. So that is important. But targeting isn't anywhere near as complicated as it is in Yu-Gi-Oh! An effect either targets. Well, no, it just targets. An effect targets. It just doesn't always, if it hits multiple things, it doesn't target all of them all the time, unless it says so. That's the general gist of how targeting works, at least. Because otherwise it's just confusing. And again, I'm trying to make everything not confusing because no one wants to play something that's just confusing. Yeah, the one last thing I was going to mention, let's look at a duelist for an example here. Sometimes there are card words in quotation marks. So, yeah, something in quotation marks means a card with that specific name. So in this case, Duelist Rystar specifically says you can search your deck for E-Hero Neos. There is a card called E-Hero Neos. That is his exact name. Because I'm lazy. I didn't want to write out his full name. Where is he? There he is. So obviously you can search for a card with that exact name. And then there's sometimes a card that will mention something with a part of a name. I'm trying to think of an example off the top of my head. A Kirby card would be a perfect idea for that. Let's go check out Kirby. So there are multiple cards that are like Fire Kirby, Water Kirby, whatever, right? So it's in quotation marks, but if it says the word card after it, that means any card with that word in its name. Close is another example, yes. They never actually has the word close in the name of the card, I don't think. Oh, no, sorry. Dating close. A special dating close has the word close in its name. All the rest of them just say, this is treated as a close card. Well, it's not square brackets, but yes, the lines. On the keyboard, it's the thing above the backslash. I don't actually know what it's called. I'm sure one of you nerds knows what it's called, but whatever the symbol above the backslash is at least on an English keyboard, I don't actually know what that thing's called, but it's like a separator line thing. But yes, yeah, basically, you've got it down pat. I think that is everything. I think that's everything. I think I have gone over everything the game has to offer. Well, in the sense of what cards are like. The extra game mode I was talking about, we have this little extra tab here called Card Pools now. I don't actually know if even Cloudy or Lee have used this yet, but this is a pack opening simulator. It took me a while, but I actually added a pack opening simulator to the game. So there's a list of all the different packs that are in the game, which is only 5 packs, well, 4 packs. It's the base set, the Duelist set, the Kirby set, and the movie set. So we have them separated where this is just all the expansions. Has a Kirby that can attack more than once per turn. Nope, I don't think so. Maybe one of the side Kirbys. There's literally a Kirby set. It might be. Yes, you can draft this game now. I've never done it yet. I haven't tried it, but I would want to let people know that the pack opening thing is here, and so you obviously open packs are fun, but you can also save a pool of cards. So either you can set up a specific set of cards and be like, right, everyone use this like a cube draft sort of thing, or you can have just open packs and save it as a collection, build a deck out of packs. You save a pool by, there is a button somewhere that says save pool. I haven't actually used this feature yet, so I am learning along. Oh, you can't see it on this stream, that's why it's confusing me. Down the bottom of this card pool bit, there's some little buttons. One of them says save card pool. If you're not looking at the program yourself, you'll just have to believe me, because I've cut it off on the stream, so apologies. I wasn't expecting there to be anything useful down there.